Hi everyone, welcome back to another horror movie review. Today it's gonna be Would You Rather, directed by David Guy Levi and released in 2012. Would You Rather is a psychological horror that follows Iris, a young woman that agrees to take part in a dangerous game hosted by the sadistic Mr. Shepard Lambrick in order to afford the medications and bills to save her younger brother. So take into consideration that this movie has a bit of gore, and while it's not that graphic on screen, it's filmed to be much more on the disturbing side rather than just for shock value like in many 80s films. It's meant to be very painful looking, and honestly, it can be a bit of a serious tone for many gore hounds and a bit too much for audiences with a weaker stomach. That said, with this premise in particular, I kinda wanted the violence and theirs to be a bit more creative. They're pretty straightforward, and I think this plot could have been a bit crazier, but then again, the movie's probably trying to go for a more serious look, so it's pretty clear that's not the route they're willing to take. The acting in general is good, but I need to point out Brittany Snow as the main lead and Jeffrey Combs as a sadistic host. In the case of Brittany, aka Iris, she acts her fear and anger perfectly. My only issue is that she's not written to be that interesting. She delivers perfectly, I just think that her motivations are more emotionally manipulative than organic. And then there's Jeffrey Combs. He owns this role and he might be the most entertaining character in the entire thing, but the thing is, he's a bit out of place and it's so fun to watch. Everyone is in this kinda edgy role or being dead serious from the start, but he just gives this over-the-top showman energy all the way through and it's so appreciated. The rest of the actors are okay, but they're written to be either unlikable and annoying or just kind enough that you know that they're the next ones to go. There's this girl, Amy, played by Sasha Grey, who I have no idea if she's underwritten or overwritten. The rest of the victims, aside from her and Iris though, they're pretty underwritten and they're there to add to the kill count. Oh, but I like the butler character just fine. The plot itself is nothing new either, but I don't think it even stands out that much within the torture game type of horror. It's done well enough to not drive many people away on the execution alone though. The motivation of the entire game is pretty weak, but then again, most people watching it are in this probably for the gore and violence. I think gorehounds can find this a bit tame, but might have a good time with it. People who are more into the slow burn and art house kind of horror can watch it fine, but they'll probably not be that invested on it. And audiences with weak stomachs or looking for something lighter, this ain't for you. Hopefully you can figure out where you stand and if this one is for you. I'm gonna give Would You Rather a 5.5 out of 10. So as I said, the motivations of the main lead are so selfless and without regard for her own life that she can feel less as an actual person and more as a plot device, except for the very last choice. Still, she acts the part well, it's just not that interesting and a bit of a tired plot. I would have liked her and the guy she shoots to have a bit more of a conversation before the dinner to see if that could give her choice a bit more weight. Actually, the entire thing with timing the decisions worked fine and added tension, but it meant the movie was sometimes moving so fast there was virtually no emotion to absorb. It wouldn't have been much of an issue for me if they hadn't kind of bullet pointed the entire setup of the dinner. And because Iris is constantly on pretty much the same level of breakdown, the tension tends to stay in the same amount of intensity for a long while. The thing I think worked the best though was using the decisions each character makes to give some insight into them without needing to know their entire backstories. You got some people are selfish and disregard the rest to climb to the top, others are selfish but have their soft spots or more limits, others try to be fair and get everyone to be on kinda equal terms, and others are selfless and willing to take the punishment because they see others as more vulnerable. I think that worked fine, if not we would have needed an entire exposition dump to hammer this in, and honestly the decisions alone were enough. The gore and challenges themselves? I was hoping they'd be a bit weirder. The first thing is a straight up electrocution, and it was kind of funny that they upped the challenge up to 11 from the get-go, but still, it's not that hard to come up with. I think the challenge I liked the most was the envelope one, cause it offered the most variety and had actually a couple doors that went a bit crazier. Now, here's my pet peeve with Iris and the challenge. She was stabbed by Amy previously, and they say that she missed a lung. But she still has a stab wound near the lung, and unless she's Michael Phelps or some professional diver, I'm calling bullshit on the fact that she could hold her breath that long. I still don't know what the great plan of this guy was though, if she chose the teeth removal and ended up winning, like, isn't this supposed to leave pretty much no witnesses or evidence? That was a dumb dare to put there when you're rooting for her. Actually, the eye thing was also pretty dumb. Do you think none of the three sisters would have been suspicious? Yeah, the gore is good and the selling point, but when you realize he chose them because almost no one would report them missing so that they could have little to no evidence, you realize the challenges leave too much to chance and depend on the rest of the players not deforming the winner in a very noticeable way. The stick bit at least left the ones in a mostly covered area, but the mouth and eye? Then again, this movie probably doesn't expect you to actually think the logistics of the dare sober. It clearly just wants an excuse for the effects and props for the torture scenes. And I guess this brings me to my best and worst moment watching. I completely misread the tone while watching. I thought the movie was playing everything a bit too serious for its plot, so as much as I love Jeffrey Combs, he felt a bit too over the top and quirky for the rest of the cast. I thought the movie was taking itself more seriously than it actually was, and I only realized that in the very last scene. After all the shit this chick has to put up with, she walks into her brother's bedroom to see he committed suicide by overdose. So at the end you have a woman crying over her dead brother's body while a rock song is playing in the background. It's so mean-spirited, but it feels more like a punchline. It took that much to make me realize this movie was kinda fucking with me. It was a bit frustrating, but a happy ending wouldn't have matched that well, so yeah, that works for me. I've actually heard more and more people bringing this movie up in recent years, so I think it's already getting its audience. I think it's not that special, but if you're in the mood for something violent and a bit mindless, this is a perfect movie for a movie marathon. Kinda hit or miss, but it's definitely got a bigger fan base in the making. Well, that's it for today's video. Thanks to Bill and Kelly from the horror movie review Maniacs for this challenge, and to Mark Pale for this week's pick. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments down below, and see you again next week.